Now let's bring you up to speed with business development. The federal government has aggregated approximately 5.2 trillion naira in debt owed her through the Project Lighthouse Debt Recovery Program. Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning Zainab Ahmed made the disclosure while launching the Project Lighthouse Debt Analytics and Reporting Platform in Abuja.
There's a lot of work to be done. We are holding this stakeholder platform to sensitize ministries, departments, and agencies so that they can log on the debts that is owed to them on the portal to enable us aid them in the recovery process.
Able to stop the payment at that point, before those monies get to those who are owing government, so that either they pay up or they tell us to net off.
Nigeria's dilapidated roads are to receive attention as the Infrastructure Corporation of Nigeria, Infraco, and 4 independent asset managers sign a term sheet to commence an immediate operation. Godwin Emefiele, Chairman and Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, says the targeted roads are Lagos-Ibadan, Abuja, Kaduna, Kano, and the second Niger Bridge. Emefiele said the first phase of the financing is to raise 14 trillion naira debt plus 1 trillion naira equity, which is being contributed by the CBN, African Finance Corporation, and Nigeria's Sovereign Investment Authority. Maiduguri rail construction work has commenced at the Port Harcourt to Maiduguri narrow gauge reconstruction project. Oyinaya Kalu Oka reports that Minister of Transportation Chubike Rotimi Amechi, while inspecting the project, says the target is to get the track laying from Port Harcourt to Enugu completed by September this year.
Removing the old lines. They will replace the old lines with new ones, all the way from Port Harcourt to Maiduguri.
So I expect that by the time we come here, formation work should have commenced and should have gotten, if it doesn't get up to the watch, we're quite close to the one set of formation work. Clearing should have either gotten to Imo River or have exceeded Imo River. If we must meet the target of August, September to get to Enugu, both in terms of track laying, what we're trying to do in this narrow gauge line is to build the same infrastructure to facility that you have. You can never tell when you build the standard gauge on this line. They have some level of funding. I hope that we'll secure the loan before they exhaust what we currently have.
With a clamor over the congestion of Apapa Lagos port and suggestions of alternatives from eastern ports in Nigeria to ease traffic of export and import activities, stakeholders are taking the advantage to positioning Calabar Port as a major non-oil export hub in the country. Paul Abel reports that the forum held in Calabar brainstormed on the challenges and developed strategies towards achieving this feat.
That from here, a lot of exports can go into the central, South Africa.
The government at the state level, at the federal level, and all the agencies, NPA, NIMASA, Shippers Council, Nigerian Export, they should come together and work, and the customs should actually facilitate trade, and they should not be tax collectors.
Now, the World Bank says the war against Ukraine and sanctions on Russia are hitting economies around the globe, with emerging markets and developing countries in the Europe and Central Asia region expected to bear the brunt. The World Bank's economic update for the region released today forecasts the region's economy to shrink by 4.1% this year, compared with the pre-war forecast of 3% growth, as the economic shocks from the war compound the ongoing impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. This will be the second contraction in as many years and twice as large as the pandemic-induced contraction in 2020. Russia's economy has already plunged into a deep recession, with output projected to contract by 11.2% in 2022. The report also says the war has added to mounting concerns of a sharp global slowdown, surge in inflation and debt, and a spike in poverty levels. The economic impact has reverberated through multiple channels, including commodity and financial markets, trade and migration links, and adverse impact on confidence. The last 2 years have seen massive monetary and fiscal stimulus policies in response to the recessive impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, with the war in Ukraine and the COVID-19 threat emanating from China. There is increased inflationary pressures also resulting from the combination of huge fiscal and monetary injections, high energy prices, and disruptions in the supply chains of intermediate goods. Where is the place of monetary and fiscal policies in providing insulation to Africa's economy? To attempt solutions to some of these challenges is Obinaya Oruakpa, Team Lead, CEO, Grand Renaissance Business School. You're welcome to Business Express. I hope I got the...
Always a pleasure to be here.
Okay.
Thank you, my brother.
Okay, let's begin with the global economy, which is still being affected by by shocks.
Yes.
Trade disruptions from COVID and Russia-Ukraine war. How has this impacted on Nigeria's economy?
Nigeria is a subset of the global economy and it speaks for itself. We've always, meanwhile, thank you for having me. We've always said that it's a global village out there. And I've had cause to have this interaction with you a couple of times. We should actually look at it from the perspective of what technology has done. Today, you can sit in the comfort of your home and take your phone and transfer money to someone in UK, US. So same way you enjoy the positives, you should also be ready to enjoy the negatives. So there's that high level of connectivity or interconnectedness of the global economy. You know, Nigeria plays there, and there's no way we can divorce ourselves from what's happening. And if you look at the COVID-19 era, by the time you shut down supply chains, and you know we have an economy that's heavily dependent on imports. Yes, effort has been made by several governments, subsisting governments over the time, to diversify the economy, to look at non-oil exports. Because the more we export, the more we earn foreign exchange. And then the more we attract foreign direct investment into our different sectors, the more we stabilize the economy. So as much as we've not had much production go on, and then COVID by March 2020 just didn't help matters. You should expect a lot of shocks, and you saw the World Bank report what it said. You know, we have hit double digit. You know, and despite all efforts by government with the intervention funds, all of the things with the anchor borrowers program, all of the things that the CBN has done with the NBC, all of trying to stabilize the currency with the Federal Ministry of Finance, and all of the stakeholders trying to do different stuff. The fact remains that we cannot be divorced from the international, from the global economy. And then maybe by the time you ask the next questions around the Ukraine-Russia crisis, you would begin to understand the impact of the commodities on our economy, whether we're exporting or importing.
Okay. Inflation is now a global thing. Fiscal policies, tell us about Nigeria's experience and the way out.
Well, we're talking about inflation. The World Bank has already told you where we sit with regard to inflation, but I've always taken a very positive perspective to it. If we can actually just sit down and solve a few basic things, this government came in on the platform of three things: the economy, the security, and of course infrastructure and so on. If we focus on just those three areas, get the trains to work, we know the challenges we're facing with the security, and ensure that the farmers are able to go to the farm and so on and produce. We're able to dig up our yams when we need to dig them up, get the military incentivized and motivated and well equipped, get the police and all of the forces to make sure that the roads are passable, and then just get the minds of our people involved, get the education sector working. Once we get all of those parameters right, you're going to likely make sure that, because post-COVID, if you notice, people have to think inwards rather than outwards, because by the time you shut down the supply chains in China and all of the raw materials you need to work on your different manufacturing sector, then you have to look inwards to look for how to produce things inward. For instance, you had to do import substitution. So if you were drinking custard, you had to look at Akamu.
Yeah.
Okay. If you were looking at things that were imported, you had to look inwards to produce things that could sustain your economy domestically. When we shut down the global economy and couldn't move, the air travel affected, and all of the seas.
Okay, what are we doing to make these things available in terms of local manufacturing?
Well, the jury is out there what exactly we're doing. You know, you can say that on intervention funds and all of the roles that CBN is playing and the government is playing through the agriculture sector and different sectors of the economy, all of this, the Bank of Industry and all of the other different MDAs within the financial services sector are doing, Development Bank of Nigeria. But the ordinary man on the streets is still concerned about how much impact it has on these pockets. And it's a function of getting all the stakeholders to come together and work together to ensure that there is no disconnect between what we're doing fiscally and what we're doing monetarily. Yeah. So it's important for Nigeria to find a way to rally all our troops. And it's a function of leadership leading from the front. And I think the government is doing her utmost best to the extent that I know, that I've also read. But I think more can be done to ensure that we all work together to get ourselves
in what areas particularly?
Agriculture is your low-hanging fruit. By virtue of the fact that with over 923 square meters of land, over 70% of it's arable, you need to understand that it's a low-hanging fruit. The average Nigerian can drop something and it grows. Then you also need to look at fertilizer. With the Dangote facility, which is second largest in the world, which incidentally will also may have to be careful with her inputs. Because with the Russia-Ukraine crisis, you need to understand that all of the ammonia and phosphate and so on they use as inputs for the manufacturing of fertilizer would be impacted, and it's already been impacted. You also need to understand that wheat supplies, whether for planting or for production or for processing, the part of Ukraine that has been heavily impacted by this crisis supplies over 40% of the wheat exports into most of Europe and even part of Africa, including Nigeria. And then you also need to understand that for Nigeria that has the potential to export, going by the Anchor Borrowers program, which in November 2015 began to point us at different commodities that we can begin to produce and become export. How do I put export? An export-driven country rather than an import-dependent one. So you need to understand that it's a little tricky right now. But I can tell you, coming out of COVID and then having to deal with this crisis, we need to really sit down with all of our various publics to come up with ideas to get us out of the woods and have proper growth recovery.
But does everything revolves around the public sector? What about the private sector?
The private sector, you need to understand, needs to have the proper enabling environment to be able to support whatever the public sector is doing. And of course, we've already said that the government has no business in business. So what government really has to do is to ensure that you have the enabling environment for the micro, small, and medium enterprise sector of the economy. At some point in this country, the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria told you sometime about 3-4 years ago that over 800 companies are shut down. You know, you're going to be dealing with issues of insecurity. You have oil theft and all of the issues you have in the Niger Delta. If that continues, companies like Shell may have to leave Nigeria. You can't pump 200,000 barrels of oil and recover only 3,000.
Okay.
These are facts on the table. Now, you're not going to have a lot of companies operate in Kaduna and be comfortable in Abuja to take their things to Kaduna, because distribution is where it is. There are two ways you make money. You either increase your volume of production or you reduce your cost of production. So if security is such an issue, you have to invest in security to guard where you are so you don't get kidnapped. The construction people are facing challenges because they can't operate in Zamfara and Sokoto and so on. But be that as it may, we can't run out of Nigeria. It has to be by all of us coming together to think ourselves. I don't want to even say out of the box. You have to think inside the box right now. That's the current reality that is facing us. Now, so the public sector and the private sector need to hold strategic sessions. You have the NESG summit, you have the Minister of Finance hold town hall meetings. It has to be a joint effort whereby we need to understand that we're communicating, singing from the same hymn book. At the moment, I must be very, very blunt and sincere to tell you that I'm not seeing all of that happening. Let it not be that the private sector sees the government as doing her own and she doing her own. And then by the fact, we need to look at our tax regime. Does the private sector feel that she's being overtaxed? And can the government explain the reasons behind some of the taxes, even including fresh ones that were introduced recently by virtue of the new budget, which must go with a fiscal bill? So those are the things we need to understand. If the minds are not together, then it will affect whatever comes with the hands.
Okay, a lot of people have said, or both the private and public sectors have talked about diversification. What's the urgency of that at this particular point in time?
If there's a time we need to diversify, it's now. For instance, the fact that you would have thought that with the Russia-Ukraine crisis, Nigeria should be singing so far do re mi do. No. Now the fact remains that as long as the refineries are not working up their optimum, you're going to be, it's like Fela says, double wahala for dead body, double jeopardy. You're going to be buying oil at the same price with people you are exporting crude to. So it's not going to cut it. And of course, look at the subsidy. The subsidy has moved from billions to trillions now. 4 trillion. That's what the president is asking for. So it carries with it a lot of implication. At the point, I thought we were going to exit subsidy. But now we're going to be asking for about 4 trillion for subsidy. That's just facing reality because it's what it is. With the crisis, the disruptions and the sanctions on Russia and the Ukraine axis, you're going to have issues with regard to the price of oil. It has already hit.
But how sustainable is that subsidy?
It's not very sustainable because we're going to keep remember, there's oil theft in the Niger Delta. I've mentioned that earlier on. So you're bleeding from different quarters. Now it's not sustainable to use income that you hardly even have. We have borrowed so much from different countries. Our borrowing has hit trillions. Now, if we were hoping that we will have some peace to be able to invest that in infrastructure. As I speak with the Russia-Ukraine crisis, the Minister for Mines and Steel has already told you that Ajokuta is no longer realizable. And then the Minister for Transportation is telling you that with the bombing in Kaduna, he needs 3 billion to get a few things sorted to ensure that at least we have the train working. You ferry human beings, you ferry goods and services. And if you don't have all of those transactions going on, your economy is going to suffer with internally generated revenue.
Okay, funding has always been the issue with MSMEs. Where is the place of capacity building?
Knowledge is
at a time like this.
Knowledge is profitable to direct. You can't give what you don't have. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. If you don't have the capacity, I'm able to sit here and discuss some of these issues with you because having attended business school, enterprise management center for Atlantic University and paid the price of burning the midnight candle and reading up what needs to be read. Kiyosaki said, if the phone you're carrying does not make you money, throw it away. So if you carry all of those 300,000 iPhones and all of that, and you're not able to search go through the search engines and build your capacity. And then, of course, the government has done a bit of her own part. I give commendation. I cast aspersions where I need to cast, and I give commendation where I need to give. By the time the MSME clinics happened, going around it at 6 states, now that was with a view to achieving what Canada has achieved in almost all their different territories, Ontario, Ottawa, and so on. Now, if you go to America, why does America have the greatest number of millionaires across the world? Why do they produce millionaires faster every week than every other country? Because America has their mentorship hubs across the world. When the mother goes to eating grass, the children look at the mouth.
Okay. Thank you very much, Obinaya Ogwapa, team lead, CEO, Renaissance Business School.
My pleasure, always.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now moving on, investors lost 114 billion naira amid heightened flight to safety. Aisha Musa has more on the market in the week ended.
In the trading week ended Friday, April 8, 2022. Amidst the effects of the Russian-Ukraine war, 1.1 billion shares worth 10.8 billion naira in 23,471 deals were traded last week by investors on the floor of the exchange. The NGX All-Share Index depreciated by 0.45% at 46,631.46, and the market capitalization dropped to close the week at 25.139 trillion naira. All other indices finished lower with the exception of the NGX ASEM, NGX Growth, which closed flat. The financial service industry led the activity chart, followed by the conglomerates industry, and the third place was the ICT industry. Fidelity Bank PLC, Transnational Corporation of Nigeria PLC, and Zenith Bank PLC were the top 3 trades for the week. They jointly accounted for 454.8 million shares worth 2.5 billion naira in 4,587 deals, contributing to 63.7% of the total equity turnover. Also, 21,314 units of federal government bonds valued at 22 million naira were traded in 12 deals. 33 equities appreciated in price, 31 equities depreciated while 92 equities remain unchanged.
Now, the bull has sustained its territory on Monday after closing positive on Friday by 0.19%. The all-share index for 11th April closed green at 46,867.95 basis point, with market capitalization rising to 25.2 trillion naira. A total of 224.6 million shares valued at 3.8 billion naira were traded in 5,946 deals at the end of the day's transaction. Next is Global Market with Nekauko.
Hello and welcome to the Global Market Review. Global stocks fell this Monday as political and economic risk weighed on sentiment. In Europe, the DAX in Germany was down 0.63%. London's FTSE depreciated by 0.28% to 7,648.14, while France's CAC 40 gained 0.72%. Chinese stocks led losses in Asia-Pacific markets as investors reacted to China's inflation data for March and monitored the COVID situation on the mainland. The Shanghai Composite was down 2.61% to 3,167.13. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index sank 3.03%, while in Japan, the Nikkei 225 slipped 0.61%. U.S. stock futures declined in early trades to begin a week of key central bank meetings and U.S. inflation prints. Futures tied to the Dow Jones Industrial Average declined 32 points. S&P 500 dipped 0.33% and Nasdaq 100 slipped 0.83%. Now, African markets were also in the reds in early deals this Monday, following on losses in other continents. South Africa's JSE Africa Top 40 led declines at 0.52%, followed by Ghana's GSE Composite, which slipped 0.12%, while the other markets were also marginally negative. And that's Global Market Review. I am Neka Oko.
Now let's take a trip to the commodities market. That wraps Business Express for today. Remember to keep in touch with us. So do send in your comments, observations, and suggestions. Also be informed that all previous episodes are available on YouTube on the NTS channel. Business Express returns Tuesday. I am Musa Abubakar.